Welcome back to that rugby podcast hosted by the Rugby Booth. I am Luke, he's Husey. We're back again for another week, final week of the bye weeks in Super Rugby. So let's start with that, Husey. Crusaders have hit rock bottom.
Yes. Look, I know last week we talked a little bit about taking back what we said about the bye week. I said I would take back a little bit of it. You said you would take back absolutely nothing. But we have to give some credit to the bye week because the Crusaders are back at the bottom of the table. They've lost their two bye week games. They're sole basement dwellers on the bottom of the ladder, and it happened during the two bye weeks. Now, I know you're going to say that, it was unnecessary to have the bye weeks. We could have had two other games play, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like this was the bye weeks trying to extend a hand out to us and say, look, Husey, can't we be friends? Look, we'll even give you the Crusaders at the bottom of the table. Look, we've put the Hurricanes undefeated at the top of the table halfway through the season for you, and the Crusaders bottom of the table, sole last position. What more do you want? Moana Pacifica and Fiji Endura are both in the top 8. What? We've given you everything you could have ever wanted.
Yeah, and I want more. I want more rugby. That's all I want. I always want more. Look, yeah, I mean, the Crusaders have hit rock bottom, and it had me thinking, I had this thought, as we were sitting there all being very happy, I go, can we just about say, in an argument point of view, is Rob Penny now going to go down as one of the worst coaches in Super Rugby history? Now, this isn't me taking a shot at him, but when we look at it, he is currently, look, I've got his stats sitting here. I'm going to bring them up. He is sitting at 22% win rate.
1 and 12.
So he's
1 and 12, isn't he?
No, I think so. He coached some of the Waratahs games. This is all in the Rugby AU comp as well, because he had 19 games for them, 5 wins, 14 losses. He's now had 8 games for the Crusaders, 1 win, 7 loss. Now, my thing here is there's two things. For him to go down as the worst coach, like they've got some stats, Fox ran it in 2017 with like coaches who had coached at minimum 35 games, the lowest win percentage. And the lowest win percentage was like 22.5 by Nick, I'm going to bring up his name, Nick Stiles, when he was coaching at the Queensland Reds. He was 28 games, he had 7, 20 and 1 was his record. And then if we look at Penny, so he was arguably the worst coach then. Now we go and look at Penny, who's 27 games, 6 wins, 21 losses. So that was a time when Reds were in a bit of trouble. He's taken over the Waratahs, who arguably should always be a strong or strong enough team in Australian rugby. And he's taken over the best franchise in Super Rugby history. And he has a winning percentage of 22%. So, look, I looked around and I compared him to some other ones.
What's funny as well? But before you move on, I want to focus on that number 22% as well, because 22% is a very particular number in Wallabies history. Do you know why 22% is such a funny number in Wallabies history?
Is that the amount of times you've been in the All Blacks?
Because that's Eddie Jones's. That was Eddie Jones's win percentage last year. Was also 22%. So arguably the worst coach in Wallabies history, or worst coaching tenure in Wallabies history, is now being mirrored by Rob Penny in Super Rugby. So I think that 22%, that must be a curse number or something.
Well, yeah. So and couldn't agree more. Like when we're comparing this, if we look at other coaches like they had at the bottom, so they had. I'm going to pull up his name if I can find it. Naka Dlotske, South African coach. Now he coached the Cheetahs for 7 years. Now the Cheetahs have never been that good of a team, and he still had a win percentage of 30.83%. So, again, coached 120 games, won 37, lost 81, drew 2. If we look at arguably the worst super coach, New Zealand super coach ever, was Sir John Kirwan. And this is the Blues were in a bad time. He coached 49 games, they won 16, lost 33, for a 33 win percentage. Michael Foley, who coached the Waratahs and the Force, had 29% in 77 games. And then there was actually this stat that I thought was quite funny that popped up. Rassie Erasmus was 52 games, 22 wins, 28 losses, 2 draws. So even he only had a 42 win percentage. But if we go back to Rob Penny, the argument you have to make and why you can pretty much justify that he could be the worst coach in Super Rugby history is he took over a team that won the tournament the year before, and a team that is the greatest team in the history. So you can sit there and go, oh, this is a down year for the Crusaders because they lost their coach and they lost Richie Mo'unga and they lost a few other players. It's not just that. Like, this is historically bad for a team that has historically always found a way. Like, when they bet the Chiefs, as you and me both saw, we sat there and went, fuck, here it goes again. They're going to go on a run. Yeah, they lost to the Waratahs, then they've lost to the Force, who were, bottom dwellers as well. I know it's hard to go and win in Western Australia, but still, this is a Crusaders team we expect. The crazy thing about this game as well, to dive in deeper into this game, Crusaders dominated this game. They had like 65% possession. They had double the amount of metres gained. They had double the amount of tackle breaks. They made less than half. Like, I think the Force made over 200 tackles. The Crusaders made 70 odd. So they dominated this game and lost by 20 points. Like, I don't. Again, I'm sitting here judging Rob Penny, but that's, to me, what is going on there. Like, you've just got to start looking in the mirror and going, what is going on? And I know Tom Christie, captain there, said we've got to look at how Severis is doing it and play up to Severis level, because he's the only one that seems to be putting the team on his back. And as a winger,
he's the best player in the competition right now. He's the best player in the competition 100%. Right now. I don't think anyone would argue that. Like, he is the reason the Crusaders have been in any of these games is him. And you've got to just sit there and wonder, like, how did this team win the competition last year? Like, yeah, sure, they've lost a couple of pieces, but it's like, to go from one to none, it's crazy. Look, it's certainly a fall from grace from the Crusaders, but one that we can all enjoy with a good measure of schadenfreude. Looking at the rest of the results for the round, your Hurricanes continued their role, went into Fortress Fiji and got a very good win to maintain their undefeated position top of the ladder. Reds, missing a couple of players out in suspension, a couple of key players, still rolled the Highlanders 31-0. Repeating a second win against the Highlanders in the same season. This time, of course, they're hosted up in Queensland. And the Reds, I want to look at the Reds here for a second. That's the first of 3 games that both McDermott and McWright will be out on suspension. The next games, they're hosting the Blues, and then they're away at the Crusaders. Then they're hosting the Rebels at home, away against Fiji, hosting the Force, and away against the Waratahs. They don't have the worst run home. They've got some games in there. The game upcoming against the Blues, it will be a real tester for them without those 2 key players. But they could very easily beat the Crusaders in Christchurch. They're playing the Rebels at home. I think that will be a game to not take too lightly. I think the Rebels have shown that they are, not world beaters, but they are a quality team this season. Playing Fiji, I believe that is in ANZ Stadium. I don't know why it's still coming up as ANZ Stadium. Surely it should be Accor Stadium, but
no, I think that says ANZ
Stadium here on the could be.
ANZ, they also have ANZ Stadium.
Oh no, it is maybe. Yeah, yes, Suva Fiji. There we go. First thing it comes up there. It's taking me to the former Homebush site. So there you go. That's how up to date Super Rugby is on Google. Like, that's another one of my bugbears. I said it in a previous podcast. Just work on the little things like that, Then they host the Force. Force playing out of Western Australia, and then last game of the season, grudge match against the Waratahs. Not a terrible run home for the Reds.
It just must be the most inconsistent team. Like last week.
Well, you say that. You say that. I'm about to pull another one on you, so you go ahead and say what you got to say about the Reds.
Because I was going to say they 1 week with McDermott and McWright lose to Moana Pacifica, and a pretty terrible performance for themselves. Then this week, absolutely embarrass the Highlanders and hold them to 0 points. Like, that to me is just unheard of in a comp where you can do that in 2 separate weeks. But yeah, continue, my friend.
Well, I'll one-up you with that with the Brumbies, who 1 week absolutely destroyed the Waratahs 40-16, and have a week off, and then get absolutely embarrassed by the Blues 46-7. So I will one-up your inconsistent team, and that's the thing about these Australian teams this year is like, yeah, they're beating New Zealand teams, they're having some quality games, but they're also just so maddeningly inconsistent, right? You look at the top of the table right now. Hurricanes and Blues, what can we say about them? They've been consistent this season. Then our next 4 teams are the Brumbies, Rebels, Chiefs, and Reds, all of whom have been inconsistent. The Chiefs have shown some flashes of brilliance, but they're not the same Chiefs team of last season. We're seeing that right now. DMAC is having a great season, but it's just not having the same impact. The Rebels are lucky to be in 4th spot, but they've gotten wins when they've needed to. That's the most important thing in this competition, is getting wins. Brumbies just they feel like the worst 3-seed team of all time. You know, it's just you look at them, you wonder how they only lost 2 games. I feel like every second week I'm hearing about a Brumbies loss, but it's only 2 losses. But just with how they played, I guess a lot of their wins have felt like losses. And then the Reds are just, they're 4-4, and that pretty much sums them up. Is just sort of, they're just there, you know. Final game of the round was the best game of the round. Force in Perth, defeating the Crusaders, the return of Kirtley to Super Rugby, having an immediate impact for that team. Just the way he's carrying the ball to the line for someone who's had a few years off from Super Rugby, right? Who has been playing in the lower grades, who's 35 years old. He looked very energetic with ball in hand, challenging the line, creating plays. Just, it's really great to see him back in the game. And I think the Western Force will really benefit from his experience and his skill. And that could be something the Force need to give him a little bit of a push. Maybe not make the 8 this year, but maybe be 1 spot out and deny someone else a spot by having an upset. You know, this could be the game that does inevitably drown the Crusaders' hopes once and for all. I really hope so. They're running out of time. The Crusaders, they are running out of time.
I'm going to stop you there because you say that, but they are still only 6 points off number 8th spot.
Yeah.
And if you look at 8th to 12th, they have the second best points differential. And you guys are, the Waratahs, the only team that's better. So they are running out of time. I get that. But again, this won't be the last time I say this, but an 18 player format is going to fucking grind my gears for the rest of my life. They have they host the Rebels this week. Let's say they win that. They then host the Reds, which again, with what red team shows up,
could go either way. Yeah.
They then go away to the Highlanders, who the Highlanders have shown they're in a rebuilding year as well. They're playing a lot of younger players, and I'm not going to judge the Highlanders too harshly as I will the Crusaders. They then play the Brumbies away, which again we've just discussed, another team that's very inconsistent. Host the Blues, and then host Moana Pacific to end. They win 4 of those games, which, look, Moana Pacifica, Highlanders, Reds, and Rebels, they could all win those games. They finish 5-12. As we said, all you need is 5 wins to make this the finals. And I just go, they're in again. And guess who they play in the first week? They play my Hurricanes. Guess who they knock out in the first week? My Hurricanes are going to go undefeated for the regular season. And we're sitting here on the podcast the week after we lose in the first round to the Crusaders. And there may be a tear.
Yeah.
And I'm going to sit here so pissed off.
Hey. You can't be doing that. Don't manifest the negativity. Manifest the positivity, man. Put the energy out into the universe you want to receive. Don't give any more life to this Crusaders in the finals, knocking out the Hurricanes in the first round nonsense, man. It's not good for anyone except for Crusaders fans, and they don't need any more goodness in their life. They've had it far too good for far too long. So let's just embrace that for this week at least. The Crusaders are in sole possession of last place on the ladder. Let's just take
enjoy it. Well, let's enjoy it. I don't actually know when was the last time they were on last place in the ladder. I'll have to look that up. Probably 1996.
Let's do a quick Google, see if we can find it.
As he sees. Look, saying all of this, I am just going to touch base quickly on Jordie Barrett. Because some big news broke during the midweek as Hughesy goes into the depths to see if he can find that on Google. Jordie Barrett is going to take a sabbatical next year to go and play for Leinster over in Ireland, which I think it's fantastic. I love the idea of him getting an opportunity to play there. I think he'll become back a better player, as we've seen from Australians that have done it, who go over to the Northern Hemisphere and play some rugby. They sometimes do come back better rugby players because it's a different style over there, playing a different game. I think it's good for Jordie. I think it's good for Leinster. I think it's good for the All Blacks and New Zealand rugby, the image of New Zealand rugby. what it's not good for is probably the Super Rugby competition, because arguably we're losing out one of our best players, if not best player, in the Hurricanes. Also, probably one of our biggest brand player, if we know what I mean. Like, he can easily take up a spotlight. You got the last name Barrett. It's pretty easy to take the spotlight there. So I go, as much as I like it for Jordie and I like it for like the New Zealand Rugby's growth, I think the New Zealand Rugby's identity, for Super Rugby and for our internal comp, it's a damaging thing, these sabbaticals. As we've seen, like Artie Savia, arguably one of our easiest to market players, is playing in Japanese rugby and bringing in fans to that game. Now we're going to lose Jordie as well. It's touch and go for me. Obviously, you don't want to lose these players overseas and not be able to play for the All Blacks, because we're not going to be changing our rule anytime soon, I do believe. But you also don't like seeing players go overseas and other teams get their hands on players during a Super Rugby comp, which we're considering is the pinnacle of our game before international rugby.
Yeah, look, it's a clever way to retain him for the All Blacks, I guess. Because he signed that long-term deal through 2028, and part of that was allowing him to take this 6 months in Leinster, which starts December this year, so it'll roll through to May, June next year, and he gets to go over there, earn a good bit of cash for a season, and learn from some Northern Hemisphere teams. And the All Blacks are allowing him to explore that while also retaining his services. I think it's a clever agreement. If we look at it in terms of business terms, sort of think of it less of a sabbatical and more of a secondment. He's been seconded over to Leinster. Yeah. It's a clever way of getting around creating a Barrett rule precedent type thing. But yeah, I think definitely right. It's definitely, from an Australian perspective, losing so many of our stars, Will Skelton, Marika Koroibete, to foreign teams, Bernard Foley, has lessened the quality of our Super Rugby teams as well. Matt Giddo, who the law is named after, the rule is named after. So yeah, it sucks, but I guess it's better to have him lost for a confirmed shorter period of time than to be lost for years at a time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. But yeah, I don't know. I think there'll be a lot of chats coming forward now about sabbaticals, and I will be interested to find, like, if, and again, as we see more and more of them, if they can actually work out if there's a correlation between like the bottom dollar and Super Rugby, like the value that these players are actually bringing. Because we're talking about this in a business sense. This is a business move from everyone involved. Like Leinster getting a player that will help with their depth and their probably like a Champions Cup and a URC run for a season. For the All Blacks, we're letting the player go to learn a bit more, hopefully, about rugby, become a better rugby player, enjoy his time overseas, get to travel the world a bit. For Super Rugby, there's nothing gained here. Even if he comes back and is a better rugby player, us losing him for that year, I think, is not worthy the value we'll get back. So I'd be interested if they could eventually correlate and go, hey, if we let a player like a Jordie Barrett, an All Black superstar, let's say a 1 to 10 All Black level player, go on a sabbatical, can we actually find if that brings more value into New Zealand rugby or less value into New Zealand rugby, and how less of value does it bring? Is it actually worth it to continue doing this and stuff like that? Like I think there'll be a lot more science and maths going into it in the future of how sabbaticals take place and who gets to take them and the value of them. But yeah, it was an interesting topic. Did you find out when the Crusaders were last?
No, couldn't find it.
Well, if anyone knows, let us know in the comment section or drop us a DM.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to our final point, which is we're obviously at the halfway season of Super Rugby now. We're just over halfway, tipping over halfway with the bye weeks done. So I thought, what better time to look at a Bledisloe XV? And I say Bledisloe XV, I'm choosing my All Blacks. Hughesy's choosing his Wallabies. Now, we are obviously taking form into this, but it's not dead set form. Like, just if you're the star player of this season, we're also taking into account what we want for the best of our teams. Would you like to go first, or do you want me to go first, Husey?
No, I could go first. Happy to go first.
Yeah, run it for
So
us.
I'm assuming that players will be healthy and available at this stage for Bledisloe. So I've got Angus Bell in the one jersey, and look, I also want to sort of slightly touch on the bench here because I'm going to go through my front row. I've got Angus Bell, Billy Pollard, and Alan Alatoa as my starting front row. What I would have as my bench front row would be James Slipper. Bench hooker, I'm less set on. Parecki could be good off the bench again if healthy. Matt Fesler is another name off the bench. Jordan Uelese has got this sort of physical presence as well, but not great in lineouts. So I don't know if I necessarily want him there towards the end of the game. So it's been tough for me to pick, but I think I would go with probably Matt Fesler. And then Taniela Tupou off the bench as well. I think Tupou plays better towards the end of the game in short stints where he's fresh. I don't think he's a 50 or 60 minute prop. I think he's a 20, 30 minute prop. And I think that's fine. That's absolutely fine to be that. That is a legitimate role in rugby now. You're the finishing prop. It's not, it's instead of the starting prop and bench prop, it's the starting prop and the finishing prop. And that's where I think his strengths are. I think that's where his physical presence will dominate, where his ball playing skills will come into the fore as well. So
yeah, there's no better example than Oxneish, who did it for South Africa in the World Cup, and he was considered the finishing prop, not the bench prop. He's not the second in charge. It's just you are the one that will come on and finish the game.
Exactly right. So that for people wondering why they're not named, that's why. Second row, I've got Will Skelton and Lukan Salakai-Lotto. Skelton, I think, self-explanatory after the World Cup. Salakai-Lotto, though, I think has really stepped up this season for the Rebels. He's been one of their best on the park when the Rebels have been playing well. I really like his length particularly, and I like just his ability to find the try line. I think that's actually a bit of an underrated ability of his, is just actually getting to the try line and scoring. You need those skills. You need players that have got a nose for the goal line. Back row I had a lot of trouble with because I think this is probably one of the deeper areas for the Wallabies, particularly in the 6 and 8 spots. So Rob Valentini, obviously he's got to be in my lineup somewhere. Got to be in the lineup somewhere. Playing 6 for the Brumbies. He's played 8 for the Wallabies before. Charlie Cale for the Brumbies is having a tremendous season as well. He could easily be a Wallaby. Langy Gleeson is someone who's actually sort of dropped a little bit, in my opinion. I'm less high on him now than I was last season. He's just had too many errors for me this season. Harry Wilson's had a great season as well. Josh Kameni's not has been pretty good for the Rebels as well. But there's a name that sticks out for me he's come back partway through the season and he's absolutely shone since he's got in the field and hasn't been involved in the stupidity we've seen him been involved in the past. And that's Lachlan Swinton, right? He seems to have, however he's done it, don't know what he's done. He seems to have honed his aggression into being a weapon rather than a detriment. He's again one of those players. He's been fantastic in support running. His tries that he's scored this season have been staying alive during the play, has been not giving up, not being a passenger, has been involved in the play. That is how New Zealand has scored some of the most iconic tries against the Wallabies. It's just players backing up, not giving up, always giving 100% on every single play, not, trusting your player to get it done, but being there just in case he needs help. That's what he's been doing for the Wallabies, for the Waratahs the last couple of weeks. I really like that. I like the physical presence that he brings, and you need that against the All Blacks, against an All Black side that's going to try and bully the Wallabies. So I put Swinton in the 6th spot, Valentini in the 8th. Filling the 7 slot was a little bit harder for me, but I've looked at who's been the form 7, who's eligible for the Wallabies this season, and it's been Charlie Gamble, right? You look at that game against the Crusaders, and he was everywhere. He was flying around the field like an absolute maniac, offensively and defensively. I looked around the rest of the sort of Aussie Super Rugby teams. There are a couple of names that stood out to me, but I think Charlie
Resonates,
Gamble,
right?
and I
No?
think he'll be he's my second choice. I was debating putting one of those two, putting him in there instead of Charlie Gamble as well. I think Charlie Gamble would be more motivated than McWright though, because he is a Kiwi, and he was, he's looked over by the All Black system. How much would he love to get one over the All Blacks by winning in Wallabies colours, by being in the team that breaks the drought? I think he would come into that so motivated, like possibly more motivated than anyone else in the Wallabies jersey. And that for me, if I'm picking a Bledisloe 15, and that's the key point here, Bledisloe 15, that is what matters to me. That's what I'm looking at a deeper level. You said we're not going just on form; we're going everything, and that's where my reasoning for that comes in. Is like Charlie Gamble wants revenge. Charlie Gamble wants revenge on a system that overlooked him, mistreated him, threw him to the wastelands of Sydney, for God's sake, to eke out a living in Shoot Shield, and he's risen through the ranks to the Waratahs. He's overcome a below par season for himself last year, right? He did not play up to his own standard last year, and he's certainly playing to a much better standard this year. So that's why I've got Charlie Gamble in the 7. I think it was a non-Bledisloe match. I put McWright in there, but given this is Bledisloe, that's where Gamble comes in. Now, we discussed this on the podcast previously. The number 9 jersey is a tricky one for the Wallabies to fill at the moment. I am going to put Tate McDermott in there, though. I think he's the best option available right now. And with Nick White coming off the bench, using his veteran savvy to steer towards the end of the game. Those were my two options realistically. Again, with the Brumbies, just been too inconsistent for me. Lonergan's the captain. That's where someone's got to take ownership for it. Coach and captain is where the buck stops. Jake Gordon, he's a rugby player, but he's not a Wallabies. He's not Wallabies for me. And then Lowrance for the Rebels. He's been decent for the Rebels, but I wouldn't throw him to the Wolves in a Bledisloe match. The number 10 jersey has been actually a tricky one to fill as well. There's been a couple of quality options there. I think Noah Lolesio has probably been the most consistent 10 across the season. For my mind, Carter Gordon has really played well as well. Tane Edmund has been decent, but he's probably in third position in that race as well. And look, Ben Donaldson's been pretty good for the Force as well, but for my mind, I just think Lolesio and Carter Gordon represent the most upside for 10. I think Lolesio has been that bit more consistent than Carter Gordon, and he can kick goals, which is huge in these type of games. Huge for momentum, huge for building a lead, huge for chasing down a lead. My back 5, I'm assuming Marika Koroibete will come back, so I'm putting him in the 11 jersey. Lalakai Foketi in the 12, Hunter Paisami in the 13. Now, Hunter Paisami has previously been someone I've not been particularly high on. This season, he has been tremendous from what I've seen. And again, he has what I like about him, and what he's always been good at is his tackling. That hunter killer part of his game. The first game of the season, Waratahs versus Reds, he was shooting out like the aforementioned hunter killer missile, just going after Parisi anytime he got anywhere near the ball. That's the level of aggression you need to shut down some of these tremendous All Black centers and outside backs as well. So that's why I picked Hunter Paisami in the 13. We discussed the other wing spot for the Wallabies in a previous podcast as well, and your line of reasoning about Corey Toole really struck me. And so I've adopted Corey Toole into the 14 jersey here. And the 15 is Andrew Kellaway. That was a slam dunk, real easy pick to make.
And there's a C next to his name, my friend.
Are we naming captains here?
Got to.
If Alatoa is fit and healthy, I'm thinking he's probably going to retain captaincy. If I was in charge, I would start afresh and have a fresh captain with Kellaway. I would have someone who doesn't have an established relationship with the referees, because Alatoa could have built an adversarial relationship with referees in the past. Just give it, maybe I don't have any evidence for that other than just the calls that have not gone the Wallabies' way during games and the reputation the Wallabies have built for themselves. Alatoa is unfortunately tarred with that brush. Kellaway is not. It's a new era under Schmidt. Name a new captain. start the relationship with the referees afresh. That's just how I see it. That's just how I see it from a very outside perspective. I could be totally wrong. On that, but that's just my initial feelings from where I sit.
Yeah, nice. Can't go too wrong with that squad. I will now run you through my All Blacks XV that I would be naming to take on you Wallabies. Number one, Ethan de Groot. He's having a decent season for a struggling Highlanders side. I don't think we need to change a lot in our front row. Number two, I've gone to Safo Moha. And obviously Cody Taylor hasn't played any rugby. Even he was meant to come back at the back end of this Crusaders season, I think if the Crusaders are out of playoff contention, he'll probably rest the whole season. And I don't know if I'm ready to select a player who hasn't played any rugby in 6 months into an All Black side. Samasoni Takiaho, he is in and about. He'd probably be on my bench at the moment, but the way Amore's playing, I know everyone's going to judge him because his lineouts isn't his strong point, and it needs to be a strong point at that level, but I think his dynamic playmaking keeps him up there. And then three, I've gone Tyrell Lomax. Yeah. I think Tyrell Lomax is, again, having another fantastic season. The locks, one was pretty easy. Scott Barrett, the captain, would be next to his name as well. I think with Razor coaching, he'll be captain. I've then gone Tupavai. I really like what Patrick Tuipulotu's doing for the Blues, and he just needs more game time. I think by the end of the season, he's probably putting his hands up. A lot of those Blues locks are doing really, really good job, but I think Tupavai is too good to go past. Same with the Canes locks, some very good plays out of Caleb Delaney and so forth, but Tupavai is my man. The back row was by far the hardest for me, and yeah, I have tried to put some round poles into square pegs here, because I have put Peter Larkai at 6, who's played 7 and 8 for the Canes, but he can play all three, and I think he's a dominant number 6. I've then gone Artie Savea at 7, who will be back in time, especially with his season wrapping up as his Japanese team just lost the semi-final. And then I've gone Hoskins Sotutu at 8. And the reason Artie's at 7 is because of how well Sotutu's playing. And the way I think about it is Hoskins playing so well that Artie's not in your team, so then he's playing better than Dalton Papali'i's playing, so therefore I go Hoskins into 8, Artie into 7, with Artie being able to play those positions. I did think of, hey, maybe Hoskins Tutu goes into 6 and we go Peter Larkai 7, Artie Savea 8. I think with that combo, you can do a lot. Same with, I don't even know who I have on the bench in this situation, because you've got Dalton Papali'i, you've got Duplessis Kirifi playing outstanding, you've got Braden Ise playing outstanding for the Canes as well. Ethan Blackadder's still in about Luke Jacobson. Like, the list goes on for the back row. So to make that back row is a pretty bloody hard position to make, but I think those three are playing the best and would give us the best advantage against you guys. Number 9 would have been Cam Roigard, but I'm going to assume Cam Roigard's out injured, because I don't think it would be a superhuman to come back in time for the Bledisloe. So it's TJ Perenara now. And I know I'm big on Court Slatama. I'm big on Xavier Rowe. I'm big on Falau Fakatava as well. But TJ's come back in and is now playing his best footy of his career since Cam Roigard's gone down injured. And I think that's what the All Blacks would love, a seasoned vet in that 9 position, to steady the back line and keep that. And I think any of those names I listed beforehand, you could put onto the bench 9 quite well. 10 is the one and only D-Mac. It's his time now to wear that 10 jersey for the All Blacks. Yep. The easiest one, that's like your Rob Valentini, is my D-Mac. The wingers, again, this is the same as the back row. I sat there and I was like, man, we've got some serious talent. I've got Mark Talia at 11 and Severis at 14. I cannot not select Severis.
Have to have Reece at 14.
Exactly, yeah. The way he's playing, I go, even with how bad the Crusaders are playing, he is playing, as you've said, an MVP season this season, and he's doing it without much help around him. And I go, I look at all the other players. I look at Kenny Nanaholo. I look at Josh Morby, Sean Stevenson, Etienne Nano Soturu. Caleb Clark's having one of his best seasons. The depth is just unreal there. And I still have to pick those two. Like, there's just, I can't make any argument over those two. In the centres, Jordie Barrett locked in at 12. He'll be our 12. 13 was actually quite hard because Rico Ioane is the incumbent, but Billy Proctor is playing some sensational football for the Canes. And I go, if Rico wasn't as good as Rico is, Billy Proctor would be in there, and he is the next man up. And you look at Anton Leonard-Brown, Quinn Tupaia, all of those guys that can do a job in there. And I still go, those Ricky Ioane and Billy Proctor running away with that comp. Fullback, I've got Will Jordan. I think he'll be back in, as I've said, 6 months. I don't want someone who hasn't played, which it may be the case, but Will Jordan's good enough to do that. If not, I've got Ruben Love bracketed as my next man up in the fullback jersey. And again, we've mentioned this, height does play a factor sometimes, but if you look at the Springboks and you go like, Willie LaRue's not the tallest lad, Cheslin Kobe, Kurtley Ardenser, all three of them would be under 6 foot. I look at our backs and I go, Talia's above 6 foot, Severis and Ruben Love, even with D-Mac, all smaller men. But that X factor that they all have is what I'm selecting them based on.
Yeah, 100%.
That is my team. That is your team. Who wins the Bledisloe? Well, it's a foregone conclusion, isn't it? The All Blacks, they just don't lose it. It's not. I think the world may end before the All Blacks lose a Bledisloe Cup. That is us for today. The world's
going at the moment, you're probably not wrong.
That is us for today. We will be back again next week, same time, same place, to get you through another round of full Super Rugby because the bye rounds are over, leading into the playoffs. See you later. Goodbye.
Peace.